Imagine being trapped, not for a day, not for a year, but for 700 years. A soul, suspended in a state of agonizing purification, paying a debt for a habit so common, so everyday, that you probably did it this morning. A saint was shown this soul. She was given a terrifying glimpse into the mathematics of divine justice, where small, repeated sins accumulate a debt that spans centuries. What was this sin? It wasn't murder. It wasn't theft. It was something we all do, often without a second thought. And understanding it could change the entire course of your afterlife. If you find this exploration of faith and the afterlife meaningful, consider subscribing. We go deep into these topics every week. The woman who witnessed this was no ordinary person. She was Bridget of Sweden, a 14th century mystic, a mother of 8, a noblewoman who walked away from a life of comfort to found an order of nuns. Her visions, her dialogues with Christ, Mary, and the saints were not private fantasies. They were meticulously documented over decades by her confessors. These writings, known as the Revelationes Coelestis, or celestial revelations, underwent intense scrutiny by theologians and were eventually approved by the Church at the Councils of Constance and Basel. This isn't folklore. It's a private revelation deemed worthy of belief. We are looking at a window into the spiritual world, opened for a saint, and through her, for us. In one of her visions, Bridget was shown the state of souls in purgatory. It wasn't the cartoonish hellfire many imagine. She described it as a place of intense longing, a painful awareness of one's own impurity in the face of God's perfect holiness. It is the soul's desperate desire for God, combined with the knowledge that it is not yet ready, that constitutes the primary suffering. It is a hospital for the soul, not a prison. And in this spiritual infirmary, she saw a particular soul. This soul was surrounded by a darkness, a spiritual weight that was immensely heavy. When Bridget inquired about this soul's fate, the answer she received from the heavens was staggering. The sentence was 700 years. The question that must have burned in her mind is the same one burning in ours. Why? The reason for the 700-year purification was this: the soul, in life, had been a habitual complainer. It was a person who was never satisfied. If it was cold, they complained. If it was warm, they complained. If they had little, they murmured against their poverty. If they had much, they fretted about losing it. Every gift from God, every circumstance, every day was met with a spirit of dissatisfaction and ingratitude. This wasn't just about venting frustration. It was a deep-seated spiritual sickness, a constant, verbal, and internal rejection of God's providence. The soul had received all the necessities of life food, shelter, clothing, and the sacraments, but had never truly given thanks for any of it. Every complaint was a small act of rebellion, a small statement that said, "What you have given me, God, is not good enough." And those small acts added up. But how can something so seemingly small carry such a heavy spiritual price? We have to understand what complaining truly is from a theological perspective. It is the opposite of gratitude, and gratitude is the foundation of our relationship with God. Gratitude acknowledges that everything we have is a gift from a loving Father. Ingratitude, expressed through complaining, is a form of pride. It implies that we know better than God what our life should look like. It's a rejection of His will for us in the present moment. It slowly poisons the soul, closing it off from grace. It's like being given a feast and only complaining about the temperature of the soup. You miss the entire banquet because you're focused on a minor imperfection. Over a lifetime, This attitude builds a wall between the soul and God, a wall that must be painstakingly dismantled in purgatory. This is where the concept of temporal punishment comes in. When we go to confession and are absolved, the eternal punishment for our mortal sins, hell, is removed. The guilt is wiped away. But the consequences, the damage caused by the sin, often remain. Think of it this way. If a child throws a baseball through a neighbor's window, he can apologize and be forgiven by the neighbor. The relationship is restored. But the window is still broken. Someone still has to repair it. Purgatory is the process of repairing the spiritual damage, of reordering the soul's attachments and purifying it from the lingering effects of sin. The 700-year sentence wasn't arbitrary. It was the natural consequence of a lifetime spent disordering the soul through constant ingratitude. It was the time required to unlearn that habit and fully embrace God's will. To make the point even clearer, the vision given to Saint Bridget included a stark contrast. She was shown another soul, a poor woman who had lived a life of extreme hardship. She was often cold, hungry, and forgotten by the world. Yet, this woman was sentenced to only 3 days in purgatory. Why the immense difference? Because this woman accepted everything with gratitude. She thanked God for the smallest crust of bread. She thanked God for the warmth of the sun. She thanked God for the strength to endure another day. She didn't deny her suffering, but she united it with Christ's and never allowed it to curdle into resentment or complaint. Her gratitude kept her soul open to grace, constantly purifying her on earth. She was essentially doing her purgatory in this life. So here we have 2 souls, both facing hardship. One had all their needs met, but chose to focus on what was wrong, what was lacking, what could be better. The other had almost nothing but chose to focus on the small blessings, on God's presence, even in her poverty. It's a powerful lesson. God doesn't judge us based on the difficulty of our circumstances, but on the response of our hearts. The same event, a rainy day, a difficult task at work, a financial setback, can be an opportunity for one person to complain and distance themselves from God, and for another to practice patience and draw closer to Him. The external event is neutral. It's our internal response that forges our eternal destiny. Let's bring this into the 21st century. The forms of complaining have changed, but the spiritual root is the same. We complain about the traffic. We complain about our boss. We complain about the algorithm. We complain that our coffee isn't hot enough or that our Wi-Fi is slow. We scroll through social media, and our complaining turns inward, comparing our reality to someone else's highlight reel, fostering a spirit of discontent. We must be honest with ourselves. How much of our daily conversation, both with others and inside our own heads, is dedicated to murmuring and complaining versus giving thanks? It's important to distinguish this from addressing genuine injustice or seeking solutions to problems. The sin lies in the habitual, ungrateful, and unproductive focus on the negative, the constant rejection of the present moment as a gift from God. If complaining is the poison, gratitude is the antidote. But it's a muscle that needs to be exercised. It doesn't always come naturally, especially when things are difficult. So how do we cultivate it? We can start small. Begin and end each day by naming 3 specific things you are thankful for, no matter how tiny. When you find yourself about to complain, stop. Force yourself to find one positive thing in that situation. This is the practice of giving thanks in all circumstances. It doesn't mean you're thankful times for times the bad thing, but that you can be thankful to God times in times the midst of it, trusting in His plan. A gratitude journal, the rosary, or simply saying thank you Lord throughout the day can radically rewire our spiritual disposition from complaint to praise. The poor woman in the vision understood a secret that many of us have forgotten: the value of redemptive suffering. She didn't just endure her hardships. She actively offered them to God. When we are in a situation we cannot change: chronic pain, a difficult relationship, to an unavoidable stressor, we have a choice. We can complain, which benefits no one and harms our soul. Or we can say, Lord, I accept this suffering. I unite it to your suffering on the cross for the salvation of souls and in reparation for my own sins. This act of the will transforms meaningless pain into a powerful prayer. It turns a spiritual liability into a spiritual asset. This is how we can do our purgatory here on earth, willingly. It is the fast track to sanctity and the most powerful way to shorten our time of purification after death. In other revelations, Christ gave Saint Bridget 5 conditions for shortening or even bypassing purgatory. Notice how they all relate to the sin of complaining. First, to love God with all one's heart, which naturally leads to gratitude. Second, to desire nothing other than God and His will, which is the direct opposite of complaining that His will isn't to our liking. Third, to have contrition for sins committed, which means recognizing our faults instead of blaming our circumstances. Fourth, to practice humility and obedience, accepting our place and God's authority. And fifth, to willingly renounce one's own will, especially the attachment to comfort and the desire for things to always go our way. The habit of complaining violates every single one of these principles. It is a master sin that feeds pride, rejects God's will, and keeps us attached to worldly comforts. A 700-year sentence can sound terrifyingly harsh. It can make God seem like a cruel accountant, but we must see it through the lens of mercy. Purgatory is not God's revenge. It is His remedy. It is the final, ultimate act of His love to ensure that no soul enters the perfect bliss of heaven with any stain, any attachment to sin, any trace of ingratitude left. He loves us too much to let us be anything less than perfect. The purification is painful, yes, but it is a pain that heals, a fire that refines, not destroys. And we have the power, through our choices here and now, through prayer, and through the sacraments, to minimize or even eliminate that process for ourselves. The vision of Saint Bridget is not meant to scare us into submission. It is a wake-up call. It's a reminder that our small habits, our daily attitudes, and the words we speak have immense spiritual weight. They are either building us up for heaven or accumulating a debt that must be paid. The choice between a 700-year purification and a swift entry into paradise can hinge on something as simple as choosing gratitude over complaint, acceptance over resistance, thanksgiving over murmuring. The good news is that every single moment is a new opportunity to make that choice. Today, right now, you can begin to change your trajectory. You can start paying your debts now, with the currency of gratitude and acceptance, so that when your time comes, you are ready to enter the feast without delay. What is one thing, just one, that you are truly grateful for today? Share it in the comments below. Let's fill this space with gratitude.